Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Metamorphosis podcast. My name is Milan. I'm your host. Call me whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm thankful that you're here. I'm going to keep this as short as possible. I'm also expecting some guests, so my bell might ring at any moment. And this is going to be a very sweet topic. And I think it's one of the most actual topics of 21st century, which is relationships. Of course it's relationships, because everything is relational. Even Alan Watts says it, and all the, if you wish, or if you will, spiritual gurus and teachers tell the same thing, which is that existence is relational. We know it is relational. We know that we exist related to one another, and how important we are for each other to establish our identities, to see who we are, and who we are always changes. And I'm here to discuss that today, and how that exactly influences contemporary relationships between men and women, regardless of the label, familial, romantic, you name it. It doesn't matter, because what matters is relationship itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to just, as I go through this podcast, discover together. Because if I say something, I want you to question it. I don't want you to take it as true, as factual. I want you to know that me, like yourself, that I am trying to discover truth, and I'm discovering truth daily, and reality, and understanding that. And for that, we need to do that together, which is why this is so difficult, because we're so separated. If you're watching me on the internet and we're not meeting in real life, that is probably because our lives are very busy. We're separated. We're not coming together. Our paths are not meeting, and that is, well, I'm not going to judge it. It's the way it is. But it simply is, and I guess that's okay. I've lost many friends since, well, I can only refer to it as awakening, but since awakening for me happens daily and in layers, I guess everything changes all the time. And people that say hey to me one day don't say hi to me another day. And all of them have their reasons to do that. And I was never the one to do that, interestingly enough. I find that behavior very confusing, especially because I'm here in Sweden. And for people in Sweden, that seems to be the default. I'm not generalizing or trying to poke at Swedes. Simply, now that I think about it, that it's quite normal for people to be very polarized and to be very volatile in how they view each other and their friendships. But for me, it's really important to have that form of, for lack of a better word, loyalty. That there is, regardless of the emotions and what's happening, that there is communication. So what is actually happening with contemporary relationships? The reason we came to this question, at least me, and through what I've discovered and through my limited exposure to certain contents, to certain people in my own private life, is that, oh, wait, I forgot to turn a second light. Just a second. There, much better. Now it's very illuminated. Where was I? Gosh, I had to hear that again. No, I'll take it as it is. For me, I was telling that it was never a problem to tell people as things were. Not assuming I'm right, but simply you cannot avoid conflict. So don't be afraid of conflict if you want to grow in relationships. But at the same time, why does there have to be conflict? That is I've discovered that recently, and it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind, the fact and the reality, when I realized that I do not have to have a conflict with anyone, because I don't necessarily agree or disagree, because I don't know anything, essentially. And I know this sounds like I have a friend whom I spoke to yesterday, and he loves labeling things, and he said, well, that's a philosophical idea. And that in itself is a categorization and compartmentalization. Instead of exploring what reality is, we put it in a box and we say, well, that's a philosophical thing. And that's what we've done to the world. We've fragmented the world in order to understand it, when in reality, we did not recognize our own incapacity to fully understand this beautiful existence, this beautiful experience called life. I find that fascinating in so many ways that I cannot wait to speak about it more. And how this manifested for me was in, again, losing many, many people in my life and gaining many, many acquaintanceships and friendships in my life. So constant volatile movement, which after a while, after having been, for lack of a better word, scarred, I've learned to accept. I've learned to embrace that all this that I'm building, along with this podcast, along with this beautiful apartment, these awesome speakers, this beautiful computer, all this microphone, this beautiful camera, all this is gonna be gone one day, as will I, as will all my relationships and friendships. And that's the reality. That's the more I try to resist it, the more I kick myself while I'm in the quicksand, the deeper I sink and the quicker I sink. And that is no longer what I wish to do. And I see people doing that a lot. Not that I would tell them what to do, but since we're all connected and we share the same consciousness, it hurts. It's divisive because we're all connected. And since we're all connected, if I see someone doing something that I perceive to be harming them, it's very sad to realize that all I can do is just watch. It's such a disempowering yet empowering position to be in. And then a part of me feels that I'm a piece of shit if I don't go out and help those people. But then I realize that whenever I try to help them, I get myself in the same position where I end up, which is hurt because I wanted to help them because they don't need saving or help. And they are clearly not doing as bad as they thought they were. It's simply that their egos needed some comfort and love, and just a general statement of a few examples in my life, but not a general rule. And it caught me off guard. I was reading something that I love and I want to recommend you, not as a dogma or a practice or a study, but I read David Hawkins' Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender, and The Power versus Force, or Power versus Force, as well as Jiddu Krishnamurti. And what I've learned while reading them is this beautiful realization that I don't see anyone anymore as authority. And that the very perception of something external to myself being an authority to how I think, to how I feel, to be it a psychologist, a therapist, be it a famous person whom I happen to admire for whatever reason, it all contributed to a deep conditioning of myself and consequentially people around me. I know I have a powerful voice. I know I influence people in my vicinity. I don't mean it in a egotistical and self-centered way, by the way. This is something that people tell me. I'm down to earth when I say it. And that's why I realize I have an enormous responsibility towards all these people to not just blurt out everything that I discover, hear, and see. Yesterday I had a discussion with a friend, and it got really heated because I tried to ask questions because he was simply telling things that to me didn't make sense. And I didn't say, well, that doesn't make sense. I asked in a curious, inquiring tone, well, how about that? And then having said that, how does that correlate to that? And when I tried to see and understand an illogical conclusion or sentence or something that to me it's not only based in reason, by the way, it's much more than that. Consciousness is more than that. And when I did that, I was met with a lot of resistance and then projection. And if you're watching this, know that this comes from a good place and that I hope we can discuss it again. And realizing that made me see that this is the case with everyone else. That since we live in such a fragmented world, we cannot be complete. We cannot possibly be complete and whole if the world is fragmented. It is David Attenborough who said that a species can only thrive if every other species in the world thrives. And I think I might be butchering that sentence, but I love David Attenborough, and I really invite you to look at the nature documentary series that he's creating. And that is exactly true as far as I'm concerned. And if I'm concerned of it, then then all of us are. That we need to create an environment that is suitable for all of us. That we can no longer harbor divisive narratives to whom I was subject myself. When I was in a certain space in life, I used to say, yeah, there are these types of men and there are these types of men. But when I looked at it, I had a divisive mindset, because in my head there was a hierarchy of value. And there is always a hierarchy of value. We have value based on our needs. And when we understand that, something completely different happens, by the way. So when I observed men and women, and when I studied and analyzed them, I realized how biased I was. Because, I want and like certain kinds of women, and then I'm not going to take these women as seriously because to me they look brainwashed. And in reality, all this is a manifestation of life and reality as it is. And if indeed I do care about said women or men, and they're doing something that I perceive to be wrong, then wouldn't it make sense that I actually ask them if they need help? Or if I told them, hey, if I made myself vulnerable, for example, through honesty and telling the truth, hey, I see this happening like this, and you've changed, and that caused me to feel this way. So not as a projection, not as you're doing something wrong, but simply, you think this is okay? You think this is the right thing to do? In the same way I would love for someone to do this to me, coming from a good and loving place. But that brings us to the other point, which is that good and loving place has become such a rarity, because instead of us opening our hearts and expanding and connecting with each other, we've started isolating from each other. And in this system, and again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist telling you that there is a system out there to get you. We all form this system and we're a part of it, and it moves as we do. If our consciousness grows and we develop and we grow, then the system grows too, in quality, in service, in everything. Which is why, for example, I no longer spend time with people who only criticize the system instead of actively contributing to improving it, or just doing something for themselves that changes it for the better, collectively, not just from their perspective. So I often criticize the 9-to-5 crowd. And again, that's a divisive narrative. Unless I say us who work 9 to 5, then I'm excluding myself from those people who work 9 to 5, which is a divisive narrative, because it creates the image that I am better than people who work 9 to 5. Even though that might be true to some point, because I have all this free time to invest in my projects, in my work, in my business, in everything that I am. That people who work 9 to 5 do not, because they assume their identity to be what they're doing, and thus that gets intertwined, and they form a new identity that is, instead of being expansive, it actually includes, I'm this person, I am a janitor, I am a train conductor, I am this. So it becomes their identity, and that's why I think the mistake we made with the development of capitalism and labor. That our identities became so closely tied to what we do, rather how we make our money, that we felt the need to harbor and to nurture that identity to keep safe. And from that perspective of wanting to keep safe, we enter relationships with each other with the intention of being safe, but we cannot possibly do that if our society is unsafe. If, again, quoting Attenborough, if not all of us are safe, how can we feel safe? If we know there is a conflict, for example, between Russia and Ukraine, or Syria, or how can we then sit peacefully knowing there's such a conflict and people dying? We don't know that as a fact because we haven't been there to experience it. But the curiosity lacks. The curiosity is not there to go and explore and search and see what world and reality is. Which is why we get stuck in social media. We get stuck in so many different ways, and we start forming our relationships to be digital and digitalized more and more. And so do our identities. As our identities get digitalized and as we become digitalized, so now we have, for example, in Sweden, we have bank ID, where we just enter our social security number and you can log in to any service that you want, not knowing that people's access to your social security number, it might not be the best thing you want for yourself pertaining to your privacy. But it is what it is. And people can accept it or not. And the entire, for example, central digital banking currency and banks failing in the US. And we must address these issues collectively if we're going to form any form of relationship with each other. Because otherwise we come from a fragmented, traumatized space, and we cannot love and we cannot build sustainable relationships if we are fragmented, if we suffer from a system that doesn't benefit everyone. So not just me, not just you, not just some guy just there who is paying his taxes and his life is in order, or illusion of order or whatnot. Unless the system benefits all of us, we cannot move together. We cannot keep investing in that system, because if the system is conditional, and of course it is, because we've lost tribe and we've lost community, and we've replaced it with a state, that now through legislation, law, pieces of paper, conditions us to what to do and what is right and what is wrong, instead of us deciding that collectively. So the illusion of this uniting in a state or in a big city is actually not real, because people can never connect to each other when they are kept so dense in such a large area. Ideally, that would be the case. And I mean, any form of idealistic view, I guess, is futile. But if we could only connect all of us together and have a consensus reality, because this is a consensus reality, and to see what the next steps are to be made together, not in a divisive way, together, that would fundamentally change our relationships, how we function and how we set out in the world and how we move in the world. Instead, in 21st century, we have an incredible division between private and public sector, between men and women, between rich people and poor people. And don't forget, just to tell you one thing, being rich and being poor is fundamentally a level of consciousness thing. And I know this might sound like such an arrogant thing to say, and I've been thinking about saying this for a very long time, because of course there are exceptions, such as if you're born in the Rockefeller family or a famous or rich family, you're rich by default, of course. But at the same time, if you do not elevate your level of consciousness, you will constantly remain at that same spot where you're at, and you will see people telling you this same thing. And as many of us tell you this, you must experience this personally. You must experience this for yourself. Because if I tell you this, guess what? You'll form an image. And the image is not the thing. The word is not the thing. When I say awakening, that's not the thing. Because if you experience awakening and I experience awakening, those are two different things. Yet they're the same thing. Now figure that one out. So what I'm trying to say by all this is that if we are so fragmented, we cannot possibly connect and unite, because we do not move together. We move separately and then unite fragmentary at some points throughout life or stages of life where we have the illusion that we're uniting. So years pass and we don't resolve, for example, a basic conflict, and we don't speak to each other for years, not realizing that it's not time that is necessary for something to heal and grow. It is the intention and the effort, and for lack of a better word, I will say desire. So when you are at a certain level of consciousness where you simply desire, because that is your nature. You don't even desire, you are. You are peace, you are love, you are understanding, you are all that. And I know this sounds very mumbo-jumbo spiritual, but it is like that. It genuinely is like that. I don't want to sound like a spiritual fruitcake, because I'm definitely not. But it really is like that. It is so simple, and it's so divine, for lack of a better word. When you enter that state of consciousness, and when you realize that you are this world and that this world is you, you approach it completely differently. You are totally responsible for everything that happens in the world, and you watch yourself as you're in a Big Brother show or in a reality show. All the cameras are pointing at you, and you see yourself in everything that you do or don't do, and you're always aware of it at every moment. You just know. You know if you're doing it, you know if you're not. You know if you're making the efforts to create the life that you want for yourself, or you know if you don't. And in the same way, if you know you're being a good partner, friend, husband, wife, then you know. And if you know that you can do better and you're not, then you're not. I would love to open up now all of these segments that I've started, but I'm already talking for 21 minutes. So all I can say is that I cannot wait to continue talking about this in the next episode on my YouTube channel. Is my guest? No, they're not still here. And to tell you more specifically and in larger detail, because now I've opened a Pandora's box and I'm temporarily going to close it. It's not a Pandora's box, it's actually something positive. So I want to thank everyone for watching. I'm doing this so I can hear what's going on. And thank you for tuning in. If you're following me on YouTube, please show some love, share this. And if you're at TikTok, thanks for being on TikTok and sharing this message. If you're interested in real estate and Airbnb, shoot me a message in my other profile. And thank you. Thank you for doing this together. That's the most important thing, to do this together. Because there's no other way. I can't just isolate myself and do this on my own. I've tried. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Honesty, truth, togetherness, the whole thing, the whole shebang. That's how we do it. So thanks once again for watching this and listening to this. If you're listening to me on Spotify, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.